Imagine a sound so powerful, it physically blurs your vision. A vibration that sinks into your bones, rattling not just the windows of your house, but the very teeth in your skull. My downstairs neighbors told me to go F myself when I asked them to be quiet for my newborn baby. They thought they had all the power. What they didn't know is that I had my dad's old concert speakers and a deep understanding of malicious compliance. They started a war of noise. I was about to end it. If you have ever felt completely powerless against someone else's disrespect and dreamed of the day you could finally legally and perfectly turn the tables, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you are about to witness a masterclass in proportionate response. Like this video. If you believe justice is a dish best served loud. Let's get into it. It all started in 2013. I was finally moving out on my own, full of that specific kind of optimism you only get when you're young and independent for the first time. I found this quirky old house that had been converted into a 2-floor apartment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And as a bonus, it was directly across the street from my future in-laws, which was great. The first sign of trouble came from below. My downstairs neighbors. Let's be clear, they were not great from the start. They had this shared responsibility blind spot. The lawn we were both supposed to cut, it would grow into a jungle on their watch. The trash cans we were supposed to take out on a shared schedule, theirs would overflow for days, attracting flies and smelling like a landfill in summer. And then there was the music. It wasn't just loud, it was an omnipresent force. It didn't matter if it was 3 p.m. on a Tuesday or 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning. The bass would thrum through my floorboards like a constant low-grade earthquake. At first, the guy was manageable. If I sent him a text, he'd be pretty chill about it. "Oh yeah, sorry man," and the volume would dip from a 10 to maybe an 8. It wasn't silence, but it was something. I could live with it. I'm a ridiculously heavy sleeper. A marching band could storm my bedroom, and I'd probably just incorporate it into a dream. So I let it slide. Then she moved in. His girlfriend, and the entire dynamic of the house shifted overnight. It was like pouring gasoline on a bonfire. The dull thrum of constant music was now punctuated by screaming matches. Doors would slam with a force that shook my windows. The arguments were vitriolic, full of accusations and rage that seeped through the floor like a toxic spill. And my neighbor? The chill when sober guy. He was gone, replaced by a man who was now fiercely defensive of his right to be a menace. My polite texts were no longer met with apologies. Now, asking them to turn down the wall-rattling bass at 2 a.m. would result in them defiantly turning it up. It was a power play. The girlfriend was even worse. This house was old, with paper-thin floors. I'm not a heavy guy, but I couldn't even walk from my living room to my kitchen without her taking a broom handle and violently banging it against her ceiling. My floor like some kind of rabid mole person, signaling her displeasure with the world above. Things got really bad when my wife, then my fiancé, moved in. I quickly discovered that while I could sleep through a hurricane, she was the polar opposite. Her sleep was a delicate, precisely engineered sanctuary. The fan had to be at a specific angle in the bathroom doorway. The door had to be closed exactly halfway. The blackout curtains needed to be taped to the wall to ensure not a single photon of light could breach the perimeter. It was a fortress of tranquility, and our neighbors were laying siege to it every single night. I remember the look on her face after the first few sleepless nights. The exhaustion, the dark circles under her eyes, the sheer frustration. I tried to be the voice of reason. "Honey," I'd say, "we can't expect them to be totally silent. We live in an apartment," but we both knew this wasn't about the normal sounds of living. This was about bone-jarring bass and screaming matches at 4 a.m. She hated it during the day, too. The constant thumping made it impossible for her to relax in her own home. She started spending more and more time at her parents' house across the street, just to escape the noise. Our home was becoming a place she had to flee from. That's when the resentment really started to fester inside me. I decided to try one last time, face to face, man to man. I caught the neighbor outside one afternoon and laid it all out. I was calm. I was reasonable. I said, "Look, man, I get it. You want to live your life. But my fiancé is really struggling to sleep with the music so late. Can we just agree to keep it down after, say, 11 p.m. on weeknights?" He looked at me, and for a second I saw the old, chill guy. He said, "Yeah, man, that's cool. I get it." Relief washed over me. For about 10 seconds. Then his girlfriend opened their front door and glared at us. I couldn't hear what she said, but the look on her face was pure venom. My neighbor's entire posture changed. His shoulders squared up, his face hardened, and he turned back to me. His voice was cold. "You know what? Actually, no. It's our house. We pay rent. We can do what we want. If you think you can tell us what to do, you can go F yourself. And if you don't like it, you can move out." And just like that, the line was drawn. The diplomatic solution was officially dead. Then, two things happened that changed everything. First, my wife got pregnant, and then our son was born. Holding my newborn baby in my arms in our own living room, trying to rock him to sleep while the floor beneath us vibrated with their angry generic rap music. Something inside me snapped. This was no longer about my wife's comfort or my annoyance. This was about my child. A baby who needed to sleep, who needed peace, who deserved to feel safe in his own home. Their selfishness was now directly harming my family. The war was on. I wasn't going to sink to their level with screaming matches or petty vandalism. I was going to be smarter. I was going to be more strategic. I went online and looked up the exact wording of our town's noise ordinance. And there it was, in beautiful bureaucratic black and white. Noise complaints were only valid after 11 hours and p.m. But and this was the magic key, the quiet hours ended at 9 hours and a.m. sharp. They had told me to move out if I didn't like it. I decided instead to maliciously comply with the law, to the absolute letter. They wanted to play with fire. Fine. I was about to bring the sun. I called my dad. I said, "Dad, do you still have those old concert speakers in the garage?" He laughed. "You mean the beasts?" "Yeah, why?" These weren't just speakers. These were monoliths. Professional grade, black leather-bound monsters, each one standing 5 feet tall and 3 feet wide. They were the kind of speakers that roadies for legendary rock bands would haul onto a stage. They were designed to project sound across a football field, not into a tiny apartment. My dad had two, but my little apartment sadly only had room for one. My dad and I hauled one of the behemoths over to my place. It was so massive, we had to replace our coffee table with it. We laid it face down, the giant speaker cone pointing directly at the thin, carpeted floor, directly at their ceiling. I hooked it up to a vintage, high-powered stereo amplifier. I looked at this setup, this absurd Geneva Convention-breaking device sitting in the middle of my living room, and I couldn't stop a giddy, manic grin from spreading across my face. Before unleashing the beast, I needed to run a test. I waited until I knew they weren't home. I put on a simple track with a heavy bass line, turned the volume knob to maybe a 3 out of 10, and pressed play. Holy cow! It wasn't just sound. It was a physical presence. The water in the glass on my counter rippled like the T-Rex scene from Jurassic Park. The pictures on my walls tilted. A pen vibrated right off the edge of a table. I had to immediately go around and take every single loose object off every shelf and counter, because this thing would shake them into oblivion. My plan was no longer theoretical. It was real, and it was glorious. I spent the next evening curating my audio arsenal. This wasn't just going to be loud. It was going to be psychologically devastating. The first morning, I got my wife and the baby up early. I sent them over to her parents' place, across the street, with a simple instruction: stay there until I text you. At 9:00 a.m. on the dot, as I was leaving for work, I switched it on. Day one's playlist was a symphony of torment. I started with pure, clashing sound waves. I found audio files of sine, saw, and square waves, and played them in dissonant chords. It's a sound that doesn't just hurt your ears, it rattles your equilibrium. It's the kind of frequency that makes your vision start to vibrate and your stomach churn. After an hour of that, I switched to marching music. John Philip Sousa's The Washington Post March, on an endless loop. It's so relentlessly cheerful and repetitive. It's designed to drive a person insane. I came home from work and hung out at my in-laws' place until it was close to bedtime. At 10:59 p.m., I walked back into my apartment, which was still vibrating like a space shuttle on liftoff, and shut it off. Silent. They resisted for 3 full days. On the morning of day 2, I found their pathetic counterattack, a pile of fresh manure left on my doorstep. I didn't even get angry. I just laughed. It was so childish, so impotent. They were trying to fight a tactical nuke with a stink bomb. I shoveled it into a bag and threw it away, then went inside and fired up the beast for another day of sonic hell. Today's theme was psychological warfare. I knew they were outspoken, anti-Christian atheists, so I found hours of fiery, passionate, old-school preacher sermons and blasted them on a loop. Then, for dessert, I moved on to the most mind-numbingly stupid songs ever created. The Captain Planet theme song. The Chicken Dance. It's a Small World. Nyan Cat. For 9 straight hours. This poor old house was being subjected to stresses it was never built for. I could feel the vibrations from the sidewalk outside. I'm sure my in-laws across the street could hear a faint demonic version of the Barney theme song if the wind was right. It was on the evening of the 3rd day that my phone buzzed. A text from the neighbor. It was short. It was beautiful. It was a white flag of complete and utter surrender. Sorry, man, you can stop now. A reasonable person would have stopped. A forgiving person would have accepted their surrender and returned to a state of peace. I am not that person. I did not stop. They needed a few more days for the lesson to really, truly sink in. They had made my wife and my newborn miserable for months. 3 days of Sousa marches was a bargain. Plus, I was having way too much fun. I let the audio assault rage for 2 more full days. They tried everything. They called the cops. Multiple times. A very tired-looking officer would show up at my door. I'd politely turn the music down, invite him in, and show him my phone. See, officer? It's only 2 hours p.m. The noise ordinance doesn't kick in until 11. I'm not doing anything illegal. He would sigh, nod, and go downstairs to tell them there was nothing he could do. They complained to the landlord, who told them the same thing. Finally, after 5 days of relentless, lawful, auditory punishment, I granted them silence. And the silence that followed, oh, it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was absolute, complete. I didn't hear a peep from them. Not a TV, not a conversation, not a footstep. It was like living above a library. Of course, old habits die hard. Every few weeks, they'd get a little courageous. They'd wait until they thought I wasn't home, and the bass would start to creep back up. But they made a fatal miscalculation. They forgot about my wife. I had already trained her. I showed her how to arm the system, how to select the playlist of torment, and how to tame the beast. The moment she heard the first thud from downstairs, she would calmly walk over to the speaker, turn it on, and then take the baby for a lovely walk to her parents' house. The problem would be solved within the hour. We had to give them a spanking every now and then, but they learned their lesson well, and I have never, ever seen 2 people look so genuinely happy and relieved as they did on the day they watched our moving truck pull away for good. You know, some people only understand the language of disrespect and dominance, and when you try to speak to them with reason and kindness, they just hear weakness. Sometimes the only way to get through to them is to become fluent in their native tongue and scream it back at them louder than they ever thought possible. And that is how you handle neighbors from hell, with a little bit of creativity and a whole lot of wattage. What did you think? Was the revenge perfectly proportionate? Let me know down in the comments, and tell me what's the most satisfying, legally sound revenge you've ever witnessed or been a part of. If you enjoyed this story of malicious compliance, make sure to obliterate that like button, subscribe for more tales of epic revenge, and share this video with anyone who's ever had to deal with a noisy neighbor. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.